Guys are hilarious.
All right, welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Today we have our friend, our good buddy, Quentin Collins with us, and he and I met on LinkedIn. I don't remember who sent the initial message, but I remember you sending me a message wanting to connect and hop on a call and chat. And my response was something like, "As long as you're not trying to sell me anything."
Yeah, you were like, dude, if you're trying to sell me anything, just don't. Just don't. I was like, I'm not. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
it
so that
was
was our
hilarious.
initial meeting. And that's been what, almost 2 years now, year and a half? It's
Yeah.
been a long
Yeah.
time, it feels like.
It has been. It has been. And it's funny because I've been in that space as well. You have a lot of people that reach out to you and I get it. LinkedIn is the platform to try to sell yourself, your business, what you're doing. Um, but it's just not genuine the way a lot of people reach out. They're like, hey, well, just want to connect and get to know you and just understand what you're doing. You're like, oh, great. How are you doing? Listen, would you be willing to sit down for an hour to do this? And I'm like, I thought you wanted to connect and get like, how do you even know what you're trying to sell me I have use for? So yeah, it was refreshing. It wasn't a put off. It was refreshing when you said that. I'm like, yes, we're already aligned. So
Because I think like we were heavy into like the LinkedIn outreach at that point. We were working with a
yeah,
marketing company and I'm like, this shit just ain't it. Like this sucks. Like I don't like
yeah,
doing it to people. I don't like people doing it to me. And so when you reached out, I was like, listen.
yep.
So I guess we'll just start from that point, or I guess I will use that as our jumping off point. So we've known each other for a while, connected on LinkedIn. If you want to give a short introduction of like who you are, what you do, hobbies, interests, talk about the baby, whatever you want, we'll let you intro yourself a little bit, and then we'll get into the leadership side of things.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. So Quentin Collins, I am in Huntsville, Alabama. I'm a supply chain guy through and through. Started out in supply chain working in automotive into aerospace and defense, and that's where I currently sit at. I jumped off into the entrepreneurial venture a couple of years ago and started a consulting company in supply chain and digital marketing. Saw a need for it and really just you wanted to meet that need. And I felt like I could do it better than I saw it being done in a lot of places. So that's kind of why I jumped off there. Away from the work aspect, I have a beautiful wife. I better mention her or I'm gonna get in trouble, but have a beautiful wife and a 9 month old
Smart man.
baby. 9 month old baby and 14-year-old, so starting completely over, and an 18-year-old. And life has definitely been interesting and I love it. It's beautiful and trying to get back to a rhythm. When you have a kid, um, it changes the rhythm of life. And so one of the challenges I've had, and this is probably going way deeper in the intro than you guys want, but one of the
Nah,
challenges
you're
I've had
good.
is trying to get back to a rhythm and rhythm and flow. So that's kind of where I am, and I'm really enjoying the process and learning a lot about myself in the process as well. So yeah, a little bit about me.
That's a huge gap, right? Like 14 to brand
Oh
new,
yes,
right?
it
So
is.
we're gonna take this in a different direction just because I feel called to do so.
Okay.
What's it like? Like because I know that you're heavy into self-development, you're heavy into like mental, physical, like all of the things, all of the ways, which is one of the reasons why we love you so much. But I don't know if you were like that then, like 14 years ago, 18 years ago, or how long you've been in that game. Like talk to us about that because I know
So
Emily's
what brought me
parenting
there?
has changed huge,
Oof.
right? Since diving into
Yeah.
the self-development. So I'd love you to just take it away.
Yeah, you're about to open up a can. So I'll
Good.
say this. How do I put this? I was not this way into self-development with my daughter. So that's she kind of learned and grew with me. I'll say she learned and grew with me. Now, like it's night and day to where I'm more you let things, or for me anyway, I let things like roll and go and I flow with it and I put in my piece of parenting here or guidance here and you kind of add your things to it and you let it go and you don't try to control. And before it was more of you're going to do this, we're going to turn here, you're going to get up here, you're going to do that, and it's more of a you're trying to direct everything, and then you wonder why am I so tired and why am I so depleted in these other areas? And it's because it's like you're fighting things that you shouldn't fight. And so that's kind of what I've learned. I was previously married. My late wife passed away of cancer, and kind of it changed a lot for me. It gave me a new perspective on life, and it really threw me off into improving myself. I just had to have something to take up my mind because I was spiraling. And so I started working out, started reading more, and just kind of it threw me off into this space of self-improvement. And I really loved where I was growing, and it was very therapeutic for me. I also did therapy. It was very therapeutic for me, and it took me from there. That's kind of what kicked it off and started, and yeah, it went from something I was going to try and see what happens and see how it makes me feel and heal from, to something I'm like, this isn't something you do and you try, you heal from it and you move back to life. This is something that you integrate into your life and you continue on and you make your life better and better. I know that sounds kind of cliche, but that's what changed, I guess, in my thought process. And that flowed into business, it flowed into my marriage, and ultimately back to your question, back to my how I parent and rear up my kids, right? It's now it looks completely different than what it used to. So yeah.
Ooh, that was a whole lot there. And I just want to
It
stop
was.
and pause and say, I feel that on a lot of levels because I was like that parent too that was very like strict. We had a schedule. You got up at this time. These were your expectations, straight A's, like all of these expectations, and then down, the spiritual route. And I'm like, oh shit, now I get to reprogram my children, my boys that I've raised to be this, and I get to reprogram them into a different way. And I
Yep.
also would be curious to hear from your perspective as we grow as parents. Have you seen your daughter, your children also grow in ways you were like, what happened? Like, how did that happen? Because when we heal and do the work, it automatically like brings them along with it.
Yeah, I think she noticed the change in me as well. She has opened up more to me, I would say, and like shares things with me that sometimes I'm like, I don't even know if she should be sharing this with me, or I don't know how to respond. Like I'm not at the level where I know how to respond correctly to this, so I just kind of sit and listen. But it's definitely changed how we interact with each other, and I've seen her notice that because I'm being more of who I am and myself, and not trying to hide, or you know how parents put on that face of I'm the parent, but then their kid knows that they live a completely different life and they don't really know who their parent is. I kind of grew up that way. I think she recognizes more of this is who my dad is. And so it's kind of given her the space and opportunity to do the same and be like, hey, this is who I am. And it's a freedom now. So I love it. There's still things that of course you go through, things that I might get ready to say, or things that I'm thinking I'm like, this is something that was passed down to me from my parents, so I need to stop and check and reflip this. There's still things like that that you fight and that I'll probably continue to fight for the rest of my life, but I think it's really opened up her to kind of be who she is. Yeah.
Yeah. The level of awareness around parenting, and then also being able to see that shift into the way that you lead in your business and the way that you work with clients. Once you have one level of awareness, I feel like it just transitions into all areas of your life. And once you see, you can't unsee it.
Yeah. And one thing I'll add to that is when I started doing a lot of this work, I thought it was okay, I'm going to do this work and then improve myself and go from here to there. And it's like I started doing the work and I realized like there's a lot of shit that I gotta unpack and remove, and a lot of things that I got to take away or sit to the side that are it's kind of that self-awareness to where you don't really realize the things that you've been given, the things that have been passed down, the things you've taken on until you start doing that work and you see it's not just going from here to there. It's like, all right, these are all the things that I brought with me here that I now need to sit aside and then move forward. So yeah.
Yeah. And those things, it's so huge, right? Because like you you have all of this stuff that you're like ancestrally, and like I know that everyone likes to talk about ancestral and ancestral healing, and I like to bring the science into it too. So if you think about the people that created you, think about like the family tree, right? It's something like 48,000, or so it's either 4,800 or 48,000 people to get to our generation. That's a lot of people.
Wow.
Even if it's
Yeah.
just 4,000, right? Even if it's just 4 or 5,000 people, that's a shit ton of stuff that's
And
like
how,
filtered down through, right? And if you look at
yeah,
like, look at women and the eggs, right? Every woman is born with the number of eggs that she's going to have her entire life. So as a woman has a child, she everything that she has within her, she passes down, right? And then you pass down. So if a woman right now has a baby in utero, not only does she have the past with her from her mother, but she has the future within her, right? So she's got 3 generations worth of shit just right there. That's
yeah,
just 3 generations, right?
yep,
Like,
That's not even bringing the father's side
but
in.
exactly. So yeah, so it doesn't even factor in like all the levels and all the layers. So if you think about it, and people think about, I think a lot of people think once they get into the healing journey, whatever it looks like for them, that it's like I get to a point where I'm healed and I'm good and like things don't bother me anymore. And it's like, no, you just figure it out faster from here on out. You see those triggers faster and you see like these opportunities faster.
exactly. It's like you get the tools that you need to now deal with the challenges that you have, right? You didn't have those tools before, so those challenges kind of just they pulled you here and there, and now it's like you have the tools that you need to recognize it faster, like you said, and then learn how to deal with it. It's like me and my wife did therapy before we got married. Um, it was a lot of challenges. Like we first started, got into it, and we were like, "Well, should we even be getting married?" Like when we started unpacking everything, and then you get through it, and you realize, like, okay, these are things that everyone deals with. These are things everyone, eh, goes through, and it's good that we're dealing with them now, as opposed to inside the marriage and then having not having the tools to be able to deal with them. So we went through, and it was a lot of recognizing the things that the trauma that that you went through, or trauma you built up from past crappy relationships and things like that, like recognizing all the things that have been encoded in you that you do without you even noticing, and then realizing, like, okay, now that I notice them, I have a responsibility that when I need to understand what the triggers are, right? I notice them. Now, what are the triggers? And then backing up from there and like taking all that and having the tools to be able to recognize how you deal with that, so that you're able to heal yourself and you're not putting a lot of that crap onto your relationship. It was so vital, man. It helped tremendously. Yeah.
I love it. Yes.
Yeah.
So how do you feel like your healing journey? Because I feel like whenever we heal, it does not matter. I personally believe it does not matter like what area of your life you're trying to heal or what area you're like working on. Like Emily said, it translates into every aspect and
Yeah.
every area of your life. So like kudos to you for being vulnerable enough to come on a recorded podcast and be like, I've done therapy, I've done this, I've done this. Like people don't talk enough about these things. Personally, I
Yeah.
don't believe they talk enough about these things and about like what the healing is not linear, just so everyone knows, like it's not linear. It's like up and down and all this stuff. But it really does impact every area of your life. And I would love to hear like what differences you have seen in the way you interact with people from a business standpoint or people that you're in charge of or clients or whatever that looks like for you.
That is a great question. I think the biggest thing that's like readily apparent that I can call on is I listen a lot more. Um, I used to be like afraid of space and silence, and you gotta like feel things, you gotta fill it up because you don't want to show that you don't know, or you don't want to ask this question, or you don't want that awkward silence. And so I think the way it's really helped me is I listen more. Like it's allowed me and helped me understand the importance of your perspective is great, but your perspective is rooted back in like all the things that make up you. And for you to understand someone else's perspective, you got to really listen to what they're saying, and sometimes like what they're not saying, right? There's a lot of things that people say without saying it. And so like with business, that's helped me tremendously when I'm sitting down with a potential client or supplier, talking, sharing my perspective, but also like listening to what they're saying, allowing for space, sometimes allowing for that uncomfortable silence and space, because oftentimes people will, they don't like that silence. So they say things and they fill it with things that help you understand like where they're coming from more, right? And so I think that's the most apparent thing, is like being okay with space and like really listening to understand other perspectives. It's been tremendous for me.
What's been one of the biggest tools, or maybe your top two or three tools that you would say helped you the most?
That helped me the most. Ooh, that's a good question too. Top two or three tools. You guys are like hitting some bangers right now. Top two or three tools.
It's our beautiful script that we don't have or use.
That part.
I think, of course, like I said before, listening, listening more than you talk, not being afraid to ask questions. Like questions are so important. Oftentimes, I've worked with a lot of individuals that are like early in their careers, and you can tell like there are really smart people out there that are coming out of college and moving into the workforce. And one of the challenges that I see is like they don't want to ask questions because they don't want to think that they don't know. They don't want you to think that they don't know, right? And that kind of leads into your career as you progress and go along. And so I had a mentor tell me like the quality of your questions are really going to help with the quality of what you're trying to execute and do. And so the questions that I ask now before I go into a meeting or before I sit down with somebody, if I can, I'll sit there and like go through what are the questions that I want to ask. And I really look at it from a perspective of what's like if I get an answer back, is this answer going to help me understand or help in like how I move and how I go through and execute. And so I think the quality of your questions really help. And you really got to look at it from a standpoint of if you get answers back, are those answers what you actually need, right? Because you might want to know a question or might want to ask something, and the answer you get back really doesn't help you. So you got to kind of shift and cultivate your questions in a way that is going to be helpful. So, and that's helped me tremendously in my career.
Man, I can see that too, right? And so like a couple things came up of like I I feel like oftentimes people it's like they listen just to ask a not in the way that you're talking, but it's like they're not listening to you because they're just so worried about the next question that they're going to ask you that they
Yeah.
don't fully listen to what you're saying and they don't I have this issue that happens quite often with people where it's I'm like are we not in the same fucking conversation? Because like I don't know how I can say what I just said any more clear to you because I literally just said this and you heard this, right? Like,
Yeah.
where's the
Yep.
disconnect? And then with the asking questions piece, I think that's key, right? Because I feel like oftentimes our guard is up too. So there's this reminds me of a story of the first year I was in supervision in automotive manufacturing, and I came home for Thanksgiving, and my dad and I were talking, and I was asking him a question. God love this man, and he wasn't answering the question. And so I did to him what I did with my employees. I'm not like this now, but God, I can imagine how much my employees probably hated me. But so if you didn't answer my question, I asked it to you again. And he didn't answer my question. So I asked him the question again. And then I asked him again. And I'm like, oh my God, Dad, I'm so sorry. I just realized that I'm doing the same thing to you that I do with my employees. When people don't answer the question I've asked them, I just hit them again and hit them again. That's some real direct, like, that's
Yeah.
some toxic bullshit right there.
I think another piece to that as well is like another component a lot of people miss out on. It's like it's as I said before, it's great to ask really good questions, right? Go in with what those questions are going to be. But oftentimes you can go and you could have these predetermined questions and they're they might be predetermined so that you can prove a point, or there might be questions that you've set up so that you can validate something for yourself, right? And so you got to go in with the standpoint of, I have these questions that I want to ask, but if they give me information or answer it in a certain kind of way or differently, then that might take me somewhere else, and I got to be able to shift and customize this to where it's beneficial, right? And you're not trying to validate a point of view, or you're not trying to validate something that you're trying to get across. So I think that's the piece. Because I did that going into a negotiation with a supplier. I sat down and I went out, I listed out all the potential anticipated objections I was going to get. I laid these questions out. I'm like, man, these questions are going to be great for helping me discover pricing that I need to have, or if they are adding additional profit or things to this or that. And so I set all this out and I sat down in front of them and I start going through my questions. And I'm like, yeah, this is going well. And then they gave me some information. I'm like, wait, what'd you just say? And they gave me some information that the rest of my question just now, they made no sense. And so I had to kind of sit there and think through, okay, so understanding you do this now, it took me down a completely different avenue and path without going into much detail. And so you got to be willing to ask questions but also listen to what they're saying, and then and take that and then shift to where you need to shift, or adjust where you need to adjust, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense because it's like pivot, right? Like I can't tell you the number of times in our business, like we have become so good at the pivot. Like we became so good at pivoting, so good at pivoting. It's like it's a skill, but it can also be a detriment, right? Like
Yeah.
in some ways, I feel like if we would have stuck to our guns, and it's not judgment against us, going back to human design, I have a 3-5 profile line, which means my ass learns through experience. So sometimes I got to hit it 2, 3, 4, 17 times before I really get it, right? So, so I think that there's a huge, there's just a lot of factors that go into business and that go into leadership. What is, we're going to play off this pivot key for a second here. So what is the most
Okay.
like pivotal shift that you have ever felt like you've had to do in business and or in leadership to get results that you wanted, or someone that's worked for you or you've worked closely with? What's like a huge pivot and maybe like potential growth point that you've seen that you were just kind of like, shit, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah. I would say in business, the biggest, well, I'll say in leadership, the biggest pivot that I noticed was you have to connect with people where they're at, if that makes sense. Like you, leadership is it's a weird thing to where you have these goals and you have this objective that you're trying to accomplish, right? And you have these individuals that are helping you, and you guys are marching towards these goals. And with leadership, if you're not able to connect with them and help them understand why we're going after that and what we're trying to do, and maybe who should be doing what so that you guys can successfully get there, then you're just kind of, you're telling people where to go off and what to do, and it's going to create more challenges for you, and it's going to ensure that you don't, accomplish your objective. So the pivot for me was, when you have an objective you're trying to get to, you have to really understand your team, and you have to know your team to know what to give them, how to motivate them, and help them understand ultimately, like, how does what you're doing and where you guys are trying to go benefit them. And so that's the thing that, it was like an aha moment for me, because when I first got into leadership, it was like, hey guys, we got this, we got to go do this, we got these 5 things, let's go get this done this year, or we got to get this knocked out by this date. And then it was, all right, I'm not going to be a micromanager, so go do this. I told you what to go do, and then I'll check back with you in a couple weeks or a month, and you check back with them, and it's like, hey, how are we doing? Well, I didn't understand this, or I didn't understand that. And I'm like, okay, well, why didn't you come back to me? Well, I was trying to go off and figure it out. And so there's like these different components that you have. This, like, you really need to understand your team, because there's going to be some people where you can give something to and say, hey, go do this. I need you to knock this out. And they're going to go knock it out, and you don't have to worry about it. Then there are some people that are
The
equally as
Emily's
good
of the world.
at there are some people that are equally as good at what they're doing, right? But they need a little more. why am I doing this? And how does this help, how does this help me? And so you got to help them identify the why behind what they're doing. There's some people that don't need a why, that you just tell them, I need this done. We got to get this done, and they'll go do it. So I think leadership, to me, that pivot was knowing how to interact with people on the team, knowing where to provide a little more attention, a little more guidance. And that's not something that is just you just learn to do. It's not it's not something that you just know to do, right? You don't just go into leadership knowing I got to do this or that. It's something that you learn through, like you said, the bumps on your head along the way that helps. So that was something that was an aha moment for me, having a larger team and realizing like this isn't you know, a one size fits all thing. This is you're gonna have to really lead, and you gotta get in there, roll your sleeves up, and really understand your people and help them connect with what you're trying to do. I
Yeah,
know that was
because
a
if there's
lot, but
no, I was just gonna say, because if there's no KPIs and they're not checking in, you don't know. You don't know where they're at or what they're doing.
exactly. Yep. Man, KPIs, that you just hit a sore thing with me. I love KPIs. Being in aerospace and defense, being from the corporate world, I love KPIs. The challenge I have with them, I'll say challenge because that's a nicer word. The challenge is they gotta they gotta they gotta tell you something, and not just tell you something, but it has to be, you have to have the ability to make a change with those KPIs, right? Meaning you could have 5 KPIs that are giving you the state of the union for your business, and that's great. But if those KPIs, if you can't make adjustments and decisions based on those KPIs, then like what are they really doing for you outside of just telling you? So you got to be able to, and this is something that I preach and I talk to people about, because I'll consult with the business and they say, hey, we're tracking this and that. And I'm like, that's really good that you're tracking that. So what happens, if that goes down? Well, there's nothing really we can do about that. This is something that we just track to see how it interacts with this other piece. And I'm like, well, one, that's something so why did you choose that as a KPI? And so those are things that is, I think that's something that a lot of people, they will take on a KPI and they're like, hey, these are my KPIs, but they don't really understand like what they need to do to influence their performance, right? KPIs are there to help you perform better, and they're indicators. And I think that's the challenge that we have. Sorry, I got kind of on a soapbox there, but
Oh no,
You're
we could ride
completely
that.
fine. We could do a
We
whole
could ride
episode
that
on
soapbox
KPIs.
all day long. But I do think it goes back to like, what are you doing if you don't hit those numbers? Like, we came from automotive and we had daily ones. And if you didn't hit them, you were doing a root cause analysis and you were doing a 5W2H. And your whole first hour and a half of your day was spent explaining why you didn't hit your KPIs. So there was
yeah,
mornings you came in from running, like we had production lines, third shift didn't hit their numbers. Guess what I'm doing that morning? I'm doing all these root cause analysis. So it's a good point to go back to even, business owners setting KPIs, which a lot of them don't do because they don't want to be tracked and be held at accountability. But then from a corporate standpoint, they will use that for performance, which also, like, we can go down a rabbit hole for that whole conversation about, tying your performance to your KPI, where now you're just doing it to get a bonus, or they set the KPI so high that you could never get the bonus. And so you're like, fuck it, I ain't doing it. Like,
right. You find people stop tracking KPIs that they see are not attainable. Yeah, that happens a lot.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think with like as a leader and having teams, you also get to have that conversation with your team of like, what personally would you like to have as a KPI? Like, are there personal objectives that you have that you would like to meet? Right? Like, is there an area that you really excel but you feel like you could be better in? Or is there something that you're like, this is a skill that I know I need to develop, but I'm not there? Like, can we factor this in? And I think that that plays really well into the whole fact of when you're talking about like explaining to people why they're doing this and how it helps them, right? Because
Yep.
the more we talk to companies and the more we work with companies, it's the younger generation that they're not going to stick around if they don't feel valued. They're not going to stick around if they don't see longevity and what that looks like for them. It's no longer you get into a job and you stay with this job for 10, 20, 30 years. Like there's not a whole lot of people that are retiring with companies anymore. But and
Yeah,
I think that's the huge shift that we get to make culturally speaking, um, from organizations is helping people to understand it's not just do this because I fucking told you to do it. It's do this because I fucking told you to do it, but here's why. And here's how it helps you, right? Like
exactly.
and going back
Yep.
to those KPIs that you can't reach, I remember in automotive, as for lack of a better term, a production manager, I had three indicators that I got the bonus on: scrap, efficiency, and then there was a plant target of did the plant hit their fucking numbers? And I'm like, well, shit. Like, you can't control it, right? Like, I can't control what the
Right.
other areas do. I can't control what was our favorite group, not R&D. I think it was sales. Like these guys out here are wheeling and dealing, trying to get lower aluminum prices from China, people we've never worked with before, and we can't run it on our equipment, right? And they're like, well, you got to make this work because we promised the customer that we would be blah, 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 right? And you're
Yep.
stuck with
Disconnect.
it.
Yeah.
And it's
That's the other piece to that too, is like you have these KPIs, but then there's disconnects with other functions to where one of your KPIs might be adversely, affecting another function's KPIs. And so that's kind of where that being able to take a step back, especially when you're working with the organization and look across those different functions and how they're tracking their performance to see if there's anything that is kind of butting heads and keeping them from getting to where they need to get to. You'd be surprised a lot of organizations that challenge. And I think partly it's because they're so wrapped up in working um, in the business. And I know this is something a lot of people say they're working in the business and that they don't take the time to step back to start working on the business. Like, hey, we've grown, we've done that, we've gone through, we've done these things. Now, is what we were doing previously, does it still make sense to do it this way, right? Does it still make sense to track these KPIs? Or maybe it does, and we need to have these individuals that lead the functions in a room together so that they can make the necessary adjustments and give the why behind what's going on so that if there is a competing element to it, it can be worked through. And I think that's kind of an area where a lot of companies fall short in.
yeah,
Yeah, they get
100%. Like we're talking to a client right now that is like their people are working in silos, right? And it doesn't matter how big
Yeah,
or how small the company is, that's what happens, right? And then you create this internal friction, but it's not friction that's supportive and helping you grow. It's friction like I have to be better than this person. I have to do better. And it's like, yo, it's the same at the end of the day, like it's the same name on the shirt, right? Like we're all working for the same company.
yep,
Like we should be
yeah.
growing together, not against each other.
I was listening to a book and I wrote it down. I heard a saying, and it was a lot of companies compete internally and cooperate externally. And it should be reversed to where you're cooperating internally and competing externally. And I was like, man, that's so powerful and so true. Because a lot of you see these functions, business development against marketing or sales against supply chain, and they're competing, but they should be working together more cooperatively. And so I think that's something that stuck out with me. I love that saying. So I need to write that down in my office.
I've also experienced where the one team kind of leads the whole organization. Like whatever sales says goes, right? So because
Yeah,
they have the most pull because they're out there making the sales. And so they're like, we want XYZ or we stop selling. It's like they almost feel like they hold the ball in their court to be like, we can demand whatever we want and get what we want, which goes back to the culture that was structured, the culture that was built there to say, okay, somebody gave that side of the org a lot of power at some point and never took it back. And now it's not an even playing field. So now everyone hates
exactly.
hates sales or hates, whatever organization that is like, yeah, they want that. No, they can wait. So now you create that in your culture, and then it takes from leadership down to start making those changes.
Absolutely.
The uncomfortable silence. No, I'm just kidding.
Revel in it. Revel in it.
So, are there any, um, Emily, do you have any more questions for him before we wrap this up?
No other questions.
Okay. So I'll give you two opportunities.
Okay.
First thing that comes to mind, like the most pivotal thing that's ever stood out in your career that you'd like to share publicly.
You guys are making me think today. Mentorship. That I'll say mentorship helped me so much. I was working through and I was late into my career. I was probably in my early 30s and just going about it, you think you're going about it alone, doing things on your own. And I had a person that I didn't even realize at the time they were a mentor for me. And until I kind of took a step back and stopped, I'm like, wait, they're mentoring me because we were talking, and it was somebody that used to be one of my leaders, and then they shifted, the company restructured, and they went into another department. And so we kind of just kept up the relationship. Every month we would tag up for 30 minutes and just kind of how are things going? How are the kids? Did you hike today? Did things like that? And like we were talking, and they were like, hey, I put you in for an opportunity. I think you'd be great for it. And somebody's going to reach out to you. And I was like, well, thank you. And right after that, I was getting my MBA and I was in a class and they were talking about the difference between like an advocate, a mentor, and all these different things. And so we were going through and they had the table up on the board and I'm sitting there in class and it's like an advocate is somebody that's a mentor, but they advocate for you in rooms that you're not in. And I was like, it just kind of dawned on me like, oh, wow, so and so did this for me. I'm like, wait, I thought we were friends, but they're more of a mentor because I kind of bounce ideas off of them. And it was like that opportunity that came along kind of really progressed my career. And it helped me realize like you have people that are mentors, but they can also be advocates. And a mentor is somebody that is like, you can reach out to them, ask questions, get feedback. They kind of help you. They're a sounding board for you, right? But then you have that advocate that they do that for you, but also they advocate for you in rooms that you're not even in, right? You might not even know about it, right? A mentor, it's more of, face to face, but an advocate mentor is like someone that is just like, hey, so and so is great for this opportunity. We should think about her. And that was something that it changed my career because it made me feel more comfortable and helped me understand like you can reach out to somebody and you can be a mentor and advocate for someone else. So that's something that I think it progressed and helped my career a lot. And I, I've tried to do that, not even just in a business setting, right? With family members. I have nephews that, are graduating or have graduated college. And it's like, I wish I had a lot of the information and knowledge that I can give them. So it's like I need to do that. And so I try to make it a point whenever I can to mentor and advocate for those individuals anytime I can. And I think that's been a huge help in the success that I've experienced.
I love that. I love that. All right, we're going to flip the script a little bit. What is the best piece of parenting advice you have ever been given or have given to someone else?
The best piece of parenting advice that I've ever been given, I think my dad told me, my dad died when I was like 19. And one of the things that I remember him telling me was, your first reaction is not usually your best reaction. And that's something that you listen to him. And I was mad at the time about something. And he was like trying to calm me down about it. He's like, listen, you need to take some time. Your first reaction, not your best reaction. And it just kind of went in this ear and out the other. And like 10 years later, I was thinking about it and something happened. And I took some time and did not. My first jerk reaction was to tell this person how you really feel, right? You let them know, get it off your chest, so you'll feel better about it. And I didn't do that, and it ended up being the best. It ended up being the best decision. So I think even just in emotions aside, like business, life, um, that's been something that I've been able to call upon that has served me well every time. Take some time before you react, before you say something. Think about it, and then from there make a decision on what the best path forward is. So yeah. Does
I
that answer
love this.
that
I
question? Okay.
love it. It's like some Bob Proctor shit right here, right? Respond versus react.
Oh man, and you just want to react sometimes, right? It just would feel so
Oh
good to
yeah.
react.
Oh
I've
yeah.
been in
And
meetings with people. I'm like, I could I could react, but is that really going to help me? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm. That could probably be a whole episode in and of itself right
right.
there too.
Oh yeah.
Any last two things. Um, any last parting words about anything at all that you would
Yeah,
like
I have a
to?
question for you guys. I have a question for
Okay.
you all. So one of the things I've noticed, like being an entrepreneur, um, my business has shifted to where, and I love this, I'm more selective now about who I work with. And I think now, when you first become an entrepreneur, it's like, I got to do this, I got to grow my company, I got to do that. And I've kind of taken an approach now that I love, and it's kind of given me a renewed energy to where I say no way more than I say yes. And the question is, have you guys, like, what's something that going into entrepreneurship, it's changed, like fundamentally changed your viewpoint on how you operate your business?
I know my answer. Emily, do you want to answer first?
Yeah,
We'll see
well,
if we're the same.
how we operate, understanding human design and how I operate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
100% that completely changed the way that I operate and show up as a human, and it continues to evolve. I literally had a conversation today where the lady, she knows human design, and she goes, shout out to Anna if she watches this. She goes, "Girl, step in your manifestor energy and start initiating that shit." And it was just like that. Oh, I forgot. Like, yeah, I do have that. I do have that in me. And so sometimes it's just remembering that, but understanding human design and like how we work, especially as business partners, game changer. Game changer. Because there was times
Yeah.
we would message each other, be like, "I'm triggered as fuck right now, so I need some time away." Like literally, we had those conversations. And
Yeah.
then the other one would be triggered because we were now like in this cycle of triggering each other. But once we understood human design and we understood, okay, this is how we operate, this is how she works. When Emily's in manifestor mode, it's a tornado and shit's better get be going like this, which Julie then has a different reaction to. So, but yeah, that was a huge, and it also shifted the way that we choose to build our business. We're not in this hustle and grind mentality. And it's just like, no, we don't have to do all the things. And we also don't have to follow 40,000 different strategies. Like, no, like
Yes.
we don't want to.
Yes.
So I'll
Yep.
zip it there before I go down another route.
Yeah, that same answer, like human design, understanding from an individual perspective, human design and how, because I cannot tell you the amount of times in my life I'm like, why don't I have any energy? Like, am I just fucking lazy? Like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Right? Like, is there something like medically wrong with me that's going on? Like, but I don't know, right? And so understanding human design, and now it makes me look at past relationships. I can be like, oh, that person was probably a generator, or that person was probably a this, and I'm this. And that's why we're like complete opposites. Um, so understanding from a personal perspective, like how you work, what works better, giving yourself the permission to work in the way that best suits you. Because Emily is an early morning, get it, get it, get it. And I'm a don't fucking talk to me in the morning. Like I'm a projector. I need time to ease into my day. Like I need,
My wife is that way. I'll wake up and be like, "Hey," she's like, "Ugh,
nope, not yet.
not
Not
yet,
yet.
not yet." Yep. So I
Yeah.
completely understand that.
And I normally tend to have like more energy midday. And Emily is like, I like to be done by normally she likes to be done by the time I'm like really getting going. So it's interesting. It's been interesting for us to figure out that balance, but
Yeah.
also then for us to be really grounded and really rooted when what she was talking about earlier, the triggers, but being really grounded and really rooted and like intuitively what is innate to me versus what is innate to her. And with the trigger piece, it's like she would be like, "You're triggering my this right now." And then that would trigger my like abandonment wound or something. Right. And so we've gotten to do so much healing work and so much growth just by being business partners and
Yeah.
like communication next fucking level. Like I can't even tell you I cannot even tell you, because she can process stuff like this, right? And if it's emotional in nature, I take a step back, and I would say I need at least like a minimum of 24 hours to process, a minimum of 24 hours to process, right? And she'll come back with, 3 days later, it doesn't happen now, but there was a time she was like, I feel like you're avoiding this and you just don't want to talk about it. And da, 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 da. I'm like, no, I'm still working through it. Like, I allow things to come into me as they come in, and I don't, like, she's great at sitting down and journaling and writing stuff out and getting all kinds of fabulous information. And where I'm more of a like, okay, journaling is kind of a last resort for me. If I'm journaling, like, shit's real serious. But on the other
And
aspect of
and I
that,
journal daily, so I'm like, at the end of the day, I got to get the thoughts out. If I don't, because I had to process them. So yeah,
mhm,
that's
mhm,
hilarious.
y'all are twins.
Yep,
Manifestors, ma'am.
Yeah, yeah.
yep,
And so it's really been like understanding. And I think for anyone out there who knows their human design and knows that they're a projector, like, do not beat yourself up that you don't have the energy for shit. Like, you're not meant to. You're just not meant. You just don't. And so I think the other huge thing for me was learning that as a projector, if I can connect with someone who's a manifesting generator, like, I have co-working meetings with someone who does branding and design work, and we just hop on a Zoom call. Or like, what are you doing today? What are you doing today? And then it's like we mute ourselves and then we just work for an hour or longer if we don't have anything else scheduled. And that's epically supportive for me in a million different ways. And Emily's like, nope, miss me with that shit all day long. Can't do that. So
No.
that's
I
awesome.
I
I need to
can't
go
tell
back
you.
to mine and review it a little more.
Yeah,
So
I cannot tell you how much of a game changer that's been for us, both personally and professionally, right? And like the fact that we
yeah,
are best friends and business partners. How many times have people told us, like, you guys are never going to make it? Or like, you
Oh, we've
guys,
heard
like,
that more times to count.
I've had personal
oh wow,
friends. I've had
Yeah.
personal friends tell me, like, I just don't think Emily's for you. I don't think that like you guys having a business together is really going to be like, I just don't. And she's had it too on her end. People saying that about me. And then we realize, we're like, the fuck?
right.
So, any
We
other
got to do this more
questions?
often. No, that was awesome. We got to do this more often for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, how can people find you if they have supply chain, logistics questions, whatever else that you're into, and you can support them in?
Thinkqc3.com, one website. I have all my socials on there. I have a blog on there. I need to get back to writing more on the blog, so I will be. I plan to do that. But thinkqc3.com has all my socials. They can find me there. So
Okay,
thank
perfect.
you all
And
for this.
just to make sure, like, we have that. Did
Yeah.
you provide that to
I'll
us already?
I'll put it
If I
in.
didn't, if I didn't, I'll send it to you guys so you have it as
Okay,
well.
perfect. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you and we appreciate your time.
Thank you all. I appreciate you as well.